Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to another episode of Fan Focus for Anfield Index, where we look at the latest takes from fans, patch journos, all the things that are going on around Liverpool social media, all the themes. And to be honest, just at the moment, there isn't much to cheer us up, is there? There's a fan base with different opinions, but they are pretty together. We are all in the same opinion that it just isn't good enough at the moment. And there's a lot to be concerned about for Arne Slot, FSG, Liverpool, and us at the same time as well. I'm your host, Dave Davis, coming to you from freezing outside, and we just walked the dog, and literally, I think my ears are still defrosting. So fingers crossed, wherever you are in the world, it is a little bit nicer. But one scour over social media, different fan takes, accounts, however you want to put it, it seems it's pretty unanimous that no one's happy, not even remotely, with what went down on Saturday. And even when you look at it in terms of the half an hour of decency, it's fair to say Liverpool were probably the better team, and that's fair, but without really doing much in the first half an hour. And then from the time that first goal goes in, to just get bullied, beaten at Anfield by a Sean Dyche Nottingham Forest. That felt a new low almost, didn't it? Let's have a look at some of the fan takes then, and quite a few different ones, and quite a few will be shouting out tonight. And I was being honest, when I was looking at this, I do enjoy doing the show and looking at different fan takes, having discussion and thoughts back and forth with people in the chat panel. I couldn't really argue with a lot of the negatives. I thought, can you rally round and, be positive about this? But just being factual about some of these. So you look at this first one here from Sam Maguire. We had 77% of the ball in the second half, but had just 11 shots, created one big chance, and had just one shot on target. We finished with an XG of 0.83, had no idea how to create anything. I can't argue with that because, well, most of it is factual there in terms of how can you have that much possession. And I was at the ground, and even, you watched it, you would have seen it. It was just side to side, work it, get it to the left winger, watch Gakpo do nothing. Literally, we just didn't have anything. We didn't have any ideas what to do, did we, in the second half at all? It wasn't actually, it's almost embarrassing to say, all that difficult for Nottingham Forest. And it was the standard Arne Slot, break glass and just throw on a load of attackers, which seems to look like it's no semblance of a plan at all. But that is exactly what happened. So you can't argue with that one. And you think about Anfield and everything that, it means to you, what it's meant for opposing teams and opposing fans at the same time. And shout out to Bran Barry for this one, because I can't argue against this either. The biggest strength the Liverpool manager inherits is Anfield. When they lose that edge, it typically only goes one way. Klopp during the COVID era aside. 3-0 versus Palace, 3-0 versus Forest. What happened against Man United? It's all getting very Brendan. It is a little bit, to be honest, and it has that feeling. If you think of, Arne Slot's predecessor, Jurgen Klopp, he talked about it, didn't he? And it's saying about doubters into believers. It does have that feeling, as Barry said, and almost when the first goal went in, you could hear it, the collective groan at Anfield, like, we've seen this before. We know what's happened this season. We go one down, and it's good night Vienna, isn't it? That's just factual again. And it was the same feeling. It just really was, which again is pretty disastrous, isn't it? As Neil says there, felt furious at no reaction in the second half. There really wasn't, was there? There wasn't Matt Sells diving everywhere. There wasn't a rattling of sabres for everyone because most of them were pussying out 50-50 challenges in the first place. Yeah, can't argue with that one either. And I couldn't argue with this one from Taintless Red, so shout out to him for this one. And this was a little bit about after the game as well. His post-match interview, Arne Slot, is the first time after all these awful results that Slot has finally realised the situation is very bad and he's at risk. Very belated realisation. Never had this bad a spell before in his career and maybe thought after last season he was impervious. I actually sensed that in his post-match interview because usually he's quite kind of got that cold swagger, as I would call it, confident, matter-of-fact style. But this one, you could tell he was a bit like, I don't know what the hell's going on here. And I think this is new. This is breaking ground in all the wrong ways for him. He's never really if you look at his managerial career, had this type of situation where he's almost been at the top. And I know people will say his last season at Feyenoord, but it wasn't really the same situation. It's really overcoming that adversity, as we know Jurgen Klopp could do time and time again. Slot doesn't really have that on his CV, to be honest. And your big questions if he can do it in this one as well. Can't argue with that take either. Sam also had this one as well that, and this is true, you do have sympathy for Slot, but he's making bizarre decisions. So Bosley at right back was his choice. Could have used Gomez or Ramsey there and kept Dom at 10, especially with Verts out. Would have given us the option of Jones off the bench then. I agree with that. It was interesting. Me and David Lynch probably didn't quite agree on that when we discussed it earlier, that Dominic Szoboszlai, I do think, has been Liverpool's best player by far. It's not really a contest this season, isn't it? So surely, part of the minor reinvigoration has been about him being at the 10 and, that press and what that could do. And yet he just took him out of it and put him back to right back. And I get the argument, as David Lynch and others said about what he's been right back this season like against Arsenal. But just thinking in recent times as well, if your best player has to be in his best position so he can do his best work, Arne Slot didn't do that at all. And it didn't really work with the switch of Curtis there to right back. Szoboszlai forward did it. So it just didn't help his decisions at all. And as Gary mentions there about other players, I'm not sure I agree with this. Isak's failed this season. Ekitike is the main man. He needs to be told to score goals. Not sure I agree with that, Gary. It's early in the season. It'd just be nice to see Isak more on the field. And I know he looks grossly unfit. And I know he got very little service in this one. But the big concern around Isak for me is, and I mentioned this on Media Matters earlier, do Liverpool know how to play with an out-and-out number 9? All the best minutes from last season or the recent times we've seen her, if you think back to last campaign, Diaz as almost a false 9 in the middle. That was the most successful. There was quite often times where he couldn't integrate Nunes, into the team, and often he did his best work working hard and dropping deep, isn't it? Liverpool just looked totally confuddled over how to integrate a number 9 right now, like Alexander Isak. All takes is hard to disagree with. And shout out to Steve McVie for this one because, a bit sweeping, but again, I can't argue with this. All the issues we're encountering now were present post-PSG. None of it was rectified post-season. Woeful off the ball work, shocking structure, and shoddy defending. It followed us into this season. It's like they lumped 400 million on shiny new toys without any plan. Does feel it a little bit, doesn't it? Yeah. What is the plan? What are they trying to do? The thing about Verts playing him in the 10, that seems to have been abandoned. But surely you're thinking if you're going to play Verts in the 10, you've got to have more heavy artillery behind him. And when McAllister and Gravenberch, I know no one quite predicted this drop-off from Maka, but that physicality, Frimpong as a right back, there's all those questions, isn't there? really around recruitment, but the off-the-ball work, the lack of the press, the lack of physicality. As Steve said there, it's nothing new, is it? It's nothing you were like, hold on, where did this come from? It's what we've seen repeatedly. And as Back on Our Perch says there in the chat panel, worried about where our next 3 points are coming from. Weirdly, I think they'll come in the Champions League. That still counts out, doesn't it? Probably against PSV, but against West Ham on Sunday going forward, you'd have big questions, wouldn't you? And, you know, you can't ignore the debate about Arne Slot's future, and quite a few are going quite hard on this now. And there's a logical element. It's not just emotional, you know, elements pouring out. So shout out to Rory for this, Rory Greenfield, who put, good footballers don't turn bad overnight, let alone elite ones. It's on the coach. We'll always be grateful for last season, but this just can't happen at a club of this stature that gave the manager this much attacking talent in the summer. It's now time to move on. And for those who follow Rory, they'll know he's quite a sort of logical, tends to be balanced in how he sees it. But if you sort of look at that objectively, Liverpool have lost 6 out their last 7. I think 8 in all 11, unless someone's going to correct me on that. In the form table, if you look at the last 7, they're 19th. Only Wolves below them. And I think Wolves have got 2 points all season. So there's that at the same time. And there is an element. It always goes to that question when you're analysing a coach to start with. Are they getting the most out of the players they have in the collective? And I don't think Arne Slot is getting anywhere near that at all at the moment. So that is the big worry. East. A lot you can't really argue with right now, isn't there? Now, shout out to my Irish presidential candidate, Trev Downey, because I thought he had a very good tweet. Because I've seen extremes and other fan accounts talking about like, oh, you know, people are going too gung-ho on this or, you know, too emotional. So I thought this was a great tweet from Trev. I've no appetite for sacking a fella who's won the league precisely because he is a good manager. I've zero problem with people who do want change. There's a valid argument for it. Sanctimonious, back the manager. We are Liverpool stuff. It's just ostrich behaviour at this stage. I couldn't agree with what Trev said more there. And I was honest when I did news round this morning, said it's actually getting on my nerves a little bit now when people take umbrage. Again, you know, for those who are slot out, they say, you know, it's time, we need a change if we're going to achieve what we want to achieve or have minimum goals. I can understand that. You can clearly make a case from that because of the run of form, which if someone had said to you honestly and objectively at the start of the season, this would be the case, you'd have probably laughed at them. And then you'd have said, no, that isn't acceptable at the same time. So I think that's right. You're going to see a split a little bit in the fan base because you can make a case either way. And you're not going to like this. You won't agree, but you know it's true deep down if you go to one or the other. You can completely make a case for slot out, as I just said. You can also make a case for the credit in the bank, the league title, everything that's gone on in the summer as well. That is a mitigation. It's just for how far almost that credit runs now, isn't it? At the same time. So yeah, shout out to my Irish presidential candidate for that. Can't argue with that though, either, can you? And you can't argue with this one, which stacks up a number of things. So shout out to Ivar Hanrahan here, you know, an account sure many of you will know. Starting a blatantly unfit Isak over an informed, confident Ekatike, shoehorning our best, most influential player in at right back again, persisting with the appalling Kanate, reluctant to give Chiesa any opportunity ahead of the ineffective Salah. I've defended him, but this is on Slot. Can't really argue with much of that. I'm just going to say that because I saw some people getting on Mo Salah, and I just thought at times, I mean, he had a good weave and run, didn't he? And roll over the foot, and Kirkes probably should have done better for that chance he rolled across to him. And did beat Nico Williams a number of times, but often he looked and there was just no options there at all. But I agree with him what he said about Konate being appalling, everything else, the setup, Ekatike. I mean, it's just madness to me. If you wanted to play Isak back into form, like, I'm just being honest, PSV makes sense, wouldn't it, to have started Ekatike on Saturday and PSV have Isak starting in a less intense type of game. It just seems absolute madness when you stack it that way. And I think most, well, say most, I shouldn't go sweeping statements across the board, but looking at a lot of reactions, there's a lot that do want to see Ibu out the team now after another appalling performance and Joe Gomez to come in at the same time. But could happen for PSV. Do you think it'll happen as a fan for West Ham? Don't see it myself. We'll find out soon enough, I suppose, won't we? Steve McVeigh had this is a very fair tweet, and a player that was absolutely doing my boxing on Saturday, to be honest, Cody Gakpo. This is what he tweeted. When Cody was your first choice left wing, you know you've got problems. Soft as shit. 6'3", 5'9" Mane had more heart in his little finger, as did Diaz. Liverpool recruitment drive was a mess in hindsight. Ignored huge areas of concern. Slot isn't solely responsible. I mean, look at that, as he said further down. It's have to be Liverpool's slowest wing play output since Cal Riera. What was the plan post-Trent? You can say a lot of things about Cody Gakpo, and people do say a lot of things about Cody Gakpo. Sometimes I think they do stray unfair, but what I just can't get away from, and it's still, honestly, I was leaving the stadium on Saturday absolutely raging about it. At least 2 occasions, and he wasn't the only one, by the way, because his Dutch compatriot Ryan Gravenberch was guilty of this as well. But Cody Gakpo also just pussied out of 250-50s, didn't want to know at all. At times, 6'3", 6'4", Cody Gakpo was getting bullied by Murillo. Yeah. And again, can you argue with Steve's tweet there? I'm struggling to. It's all stacking up when you put, the things on the table. And a few more on this fan bit as well, because, again, it's so factual. Rory Pot, I always say balance is the key, and the summer transfer window was weighed heavily in attack without much consideration how the ball would actually get there. However, with the talent we signed and the players already established, the manager simply has to get far more out this side. Agree with that as well. That, with Trent leaving, you still like, what did actually, or how do they think they were going to progress the ball, particularly the defensive element, Gay not arriving, all that goes into the mix. Again, it's just nigh on impossible to deal with or argue against, isn't it? So there you go. Those are the best takes, I would say, of the fan fallout. You probably haven't got me trade descriptions for best, but it is hard to argue against any of them when you stack it up, isn't it? In terms of a few Patch Journo takes, plenty to say as ever. Some you'll agree with and some you won't. And there'll be a new little feature where I'll give my Patch Journo take of the day. I might even rank them just to annoy them all. We'll see anyway. But David Lynch with this one tweeted afterwards. And I thought, again, this was right. Arne Slot, so much to deal with this year, including injuries, turnover, and of course, tragedy in the summer. But it's late November, and Liverpool have just suffered an 8 defeat in 11 games by deservedly losing 3-0 at home to 19th in the Premier League. How many more can he lose? Does feel like that's the $1 million question right now. Where is the line? Where do FSG actually say enough, no more, no mas? Roberto Duran, hands of stone style. It's the big question, isn't it? and it's right to call that out. However, in terms of Patch Journo takes, shout out to Beth Lindop, who I think goes to number 1 ahead of Lynch and Steele and others this week for some of her tweets. As Beth tweeted there, for what it's worth, I really like the manager. I think he did an outstanding job last season and he's dealing with the fallout from an impossibly difficult summer. Players' form and fitness is not helping his cause either. But at present, he looks out of ideas. A big few weeks ahead. I agree with all that. I agree with what Beth said there. And, as you put it, the challenges quite rightly and everything that's happened in the summer, as we know, form and fitness plays a part. But ultimately right now, Arne Slot looks out of ideas, devoid of any inspiration, and even more of a sort of, worry because we're not competing for those 50-50s and doing what we should be doing, which is right to have as a minimum expectation. You've got the question realistically of, it is fair to ask this, how much are these players playing for Arne Slot? Now, naturally, listen, they're playing for that badge, that shirt, that club, as we know. So you shouldn't need a manager ever to motivate you. But still, they are the most important person at the club. And right now, he's going disastrously wrong. And shout out as well to Beth, because I thought this was a good tweet, because we always talk about brain donor of the week. And I think the Rio Ferdinand podcast takes that, where, as they say, they queued this up with the debate of Arne Slot is under significantly less scrutiny than the pressure that's placed on Ruben Amorim when he was enjoying a similar run of results. And Beth quote tweeted that, say, if only there was a conspicuous difference between what both managers achieved in their first season at the club. Yeah, exactly. Things are bad, but they're not Ruben Amorim Manchester United bad, are they, in that regard? So it's good to see little things like that just provide a small bit of cheer from there. Not too much, though, at the same time. And speaking of Patch Journos, he probably would be amiss at me if I didn't mention a couple of things that came out with, myself and David Lynch, because we did Media Matters earlier. So this was just a quick clip, or just a few I'll play here. This was talking about recruitment and how it's worked, how joined up it's been. So let's just have a listen to this one.
It doesn't all seem to click together. The mix doesn't seem great that the manager's being given now. And, was that considered at any point outside of, he's a good player, rather than how will he dovetail with him, and how will these relationships work? I don't get the impression a lot of thinking went into that, to be honest, because what we're seeing at the moment is a total mess.
It does. And we'll never fully know behind the scenes, but it almost seems a disconnect between the recruitment and what obviously Hughes, Edwards, everyone was in that mix, and what Arne Slot's putting on the pitch, doesn't it? Because when you sign Kirkez and Frimpong, you're already thinking, okay, we're going to go to flying fullbacks. That's probably the way, isn't it? Maybe Wirtz will go off the left, tuck in, and you start to analyse like what will happen. And yet you're not seeing any of this. We've seen Kirkez quite often attached to Van Dijk's hip, haven't we? Yeah, we have. And as me and David Lynch were discussing on this one, as it comes back to what is the plan, or what was the plan, aside from, as we said, when we signed those fullbacks, because we assumed Kirkez would be bombing on, we assumed Florian Wirtz would often be on the left, inverting like he was at Leverkusen. Yes, different setup, etc. But essentially, if you looked at his heat map and what we knew, how we thought it would work, and yet we've seen none of it, have we? The disconnect just seems there. However, there's one Patch Journo take I wanted to save a little bit, down to Mr. Lewis Xavier Steele, who had an interesting little take on Saturday post-match at the game. There's a few analogies you might find fruity in here, we could call it. So let's just have a listen to about 30, 40 seconds of this or so. Oh, no. People are saying that's played without sound, are they? We'll have another go because I really don't want to deprive you of one of the most striking analogies and metaphors. So we'll do a bit of a take two on that. I don't want to let you down on this one, people. So tell me if you can hear sound again. It's important.
Absolute credit to Forest. I thought they were excellent. But Liverpool basically bent over and said, come on, lads, give us a spanking. And I don't mean that in a crude way. But Liverpool basically just said to Forest, come on, in you come, open the door into the house. Come on, take what you want, lads. Do what you want. This is Anfield. And I don't want to sound like Gary Neville, and this is Manchester United we're talking about. But Liverpool, the champions, Liverpool, 20-time champions of England, Liverpool, who this is meant to be a fortress, Anfield, has absolutely rolled over for Nottingham Forest today.
Well, I never thought on this programme, now sound is working, of course, that I'd be talking about spanking, leaving the doors open and burglars walking in and Gary Neville and all that type of thing. But aside from the strange analogies, it's hard to argue with Lewis there, isn't it, really? It is, it is Anfield and what that's supposed to mean. It wasn't that difficult, particularly. Yeah, I'll let you decide whether Lewis is cracking up a little bit there. But some interesting takes from the Patch journos. And I suppose a bit wider, because Lewis did mention Gary Neville there. You knew he'd have a say, and you knew it would be some absolute nonsense, didn't you? So what did Gary Neville say? There's no way that Arne Slot should be in danger of losing his job. This is a really good manager who's brilliant, I think. Front man for the club in the way he handles himself. He's got real class. The only thing he gets right on that, I think, is the way he handles himself. There is an element of class to Slot. I would agree with that. But just the absolute almost nonsense and arrogance to say there's no way that Arne Slot should be in danger of losing his job. Utter nonsense. This is Liverpool. 8 defeat in 11 games to have lost in the Premier League 6 out your last 7. Utter nonsense. I think Mr. 365 boy puts it well there. He would say that. He wants us to keep losing. Gary Neville is probably very happy the way things are unfolding that way. But anyone who maybe thinks, of the same, and you're on the same take as Gary Neville, maybe something just to consider at the same time. But anyway, a little bit to finish, because I know a few of you have been asking about this in the chat as well. Little bits of transfer talk, because we always want to know this at fans, what might be happening in January, what might not be at the same time. Now, this is one to clock that in the last hour or so, he has mentioned this before, so it's no secret at all. When I say he's mentioned this before, this was his tweet from November the 20th, so 4 days ago. Fabrizio Romano put about the release clause to Anton Semenyo in January is worth 60, the fixed fee, and Liverpool are seriously interested with the eyes. Now, Fabrizio Romano has actually retweeted this in the last 2 hours or so, and it does seem to be the big feature, doesn't it? The strongest rumour for us. Antoine Semenyo, and it still goes back, it sounds like repeating myself, but does it fix most of our issues? No. Is it a priority right now for me? No-ish. Because it's on the list, but it is about 5 down for me, probably something like that. So you could argue it's probably no-ish is what I'm going with. But actually, when I see Gakpo doing the things he's doing and just pulling out 50-50s on Saturday, and this is not to be derogatory because I think the kid's special, but even trying to rely on a young Rio and Gamoa who, bless it, feel for the kid. Only comes on with like 2 or 3 goals down often to do things. Yeah? But just one to keep an eye on because that Semenyo one does keep getting retweeted. In terms of what the GOAT has been saying, one to keep an eye on for later, Indy Callier did say, We kindly request Real Madrid and Liverpool fans to be online tonight. Major news for both of your clubs at 9 o'clock. Just a little thing on this that I'm sure you've seen in terms of world football news. It's come out that Vinicius won't renew at the moment, will he, with Real Madrid because of the fallout with Xabi Alonso, and that was in the photo. Maybe here's the go, Indy Callier, but maybe just having a little bit of a playful time with this, shall we say. So probably the smart one, he says, it'll be Xavi to Liverpool or something like that. But I'm not sure how much I really put on that personally. You as fans can obviously decide either way. In terms of other movers, again, I'm not sure about this one. Reports in Holland have got Ajax interested in appointing Michael Edwards as a technical director. Struggling to see that, aren't you, really? Come in as like head of global soccer, I think was the official title, wasn't it, for FSG? This assumed power well above a sporting director where he fits in that structure. To go to Ajax, who are an incredible tradition, so I don't want to sound derogatory about them at all, an unbelievable history in world football, but it's a big downgrade there, isn't it? I think that's fair to say. Yeah, Bossman agrees as well. Not trying to be disrespectful at all. Got a lot of time and respect for Ajax, but you just struggle to see that one, don't you? In all honesty. In terms of someone who could be moving out of Anfield as well, Indy tweeted this, and I've seen a few mention it. Gio van Bronckhorst, one of the assistants to Arne Slot, is one of the candidates for the Indonesian national team coach, and Liverpool won't stand in his way if an approach is made. It's a funny one because you've no way of really knowing what assistant coaches do, have you, in all honesty? But it is funny that a lot have gone with and it could be possible. Heitinger was brilliant for us, the opposing voice that Slot needed. Van Bronckhorst, not got the expertise, blah, blah, blah. We'll never know, really. But there's a lot of people, fans, who do want to see Johnny Heitinger back at the football club. One little scan of social media will tell you that. So maybe it could be a possibility if Van Bronckhorst takes that position. Yeah, we'll have to see. Mark mentions there, Van Bronckhorst was a poor manager for Rangers, brought it to us. Again, I think it's just always difficult to analyse assistant coaches in that regard. But we'll see, eh? And, I mean, this one, because Mr. 365 Boy says there, any news on Gay or a centre-half? In terms of Mark Gay, it's probably a good one to finish with. This was mentioned, and it's one from Palace Report, which is one of the main Palace fan sites, saying through Alan Nixon that Gay's ready to put his dream move to Liverpool on hold and see out the season with Palace. Liverpool were his first choice, but the failure to land him at the end of the season has put doubts in his mind. And also, John Cross of the media has been saying that it'll take Liverpool breaking the bank. Now, you add that up, just being factual, on top of Fabrizio Romano, David Ornstein, Paul Joyce, all have come out and said Liverpool will not make a move for Mark Gay in January. Pretty hard to see it. In simple terms, we've got nothing tangible right now. And also, just to be brutally honest, Mark Gay is not short of suitors, we know, in the Premier League and across European football. So we'll just be looking to see where we go, without doubt. And if you were Mark Gay and you weren't a diehard Red like we all were, or all are, sorry, you'd understand it at the same time a little bit, wouldn't you? So that was the transfer talk for you as well, people. But it's a tough period right now, isn't it? And even as we come into this week, what are we honestly expecting as fans? Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm right on this. I do think we'll beat PSV because we seem to be set up more as a European side. You think of a game like Real Madrid, don't you? It's then the West Ham away, even with their struggles under Nuno and everything like that. Yeah, it's another huge week, but we keep saying that. Can't go on Let's hope we get the change we want. Otherwise, there's going to be a change in the management, you feel. Tough period at the moment, Reds. Let's hope it does change quickly. But Monday, the 24th of November, that was another fan focus for Anfield Index.